Hello,
Um,
everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us. My name is Dalia, and I work as a community manager here at Kong. I'm very happy to welcome all of you to our June user call. Today, we're going to hear about Kong Connect and how you can uplevel your API management strategy. So, super interesting topic, a lot to learn. I'm very excited that all of you are joining us. To hear from Manjiri, she will introduce herself now. Just to mention that we will take all the questions at the end, so please input your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom, and we will answer them when she's done with the presentation and the demo. So with that, Manjiri, please take it away.
Thank you, Dalia. Hello, everyone. I am Manjiri. I'm an engineer on the Konnect team at Kong. Thank you so much for joining today and going on a ride with me around Kong's organization and administrative management strategies and policies. So if you're familiar with role-based access control, you'll find a lot of similarities between Kong and different entities that we support, different kind of resource allocation, compliance, and security governance. So to start off at the organization level, we have different entities like teams, users. These are similar to most SaaS products. So we have something different called system accounts, which is a special class of users that are for automation and integration. I'd love to give you a sneak peek into Audit Logs setup, which is a special feature unique to Kong and goes about helping enterprises get a better picture of their infrastructure. We'll lastly talk about auth settings, where you can configure different login schemes and authentication into Kong via native default authentication, as well as configure OpenID Connect providers and choose your vendor for enabling SSO for your organization. If you're not an administrative user, don't worry. We have got something for you as well, and you can come along for the ride. When we go over the administrative part, on the user side, you can control different profile sections like your change password, you can delete your account, you can take control of your marketing information with Kong and request the right to be forgotten in line with GDPR. You can also create personal access tokens and automate your login workflows and your Connect workflows all the more. So diving right into it, why do we have all these different controls and different entities for organization and the individual user? The motivation is security. Organizations want to control their resources and make sure that resources are protected from malicious users and bad actors. We get to control what resources are accessed how, and also we want to provide governance of your organization and your users, as well as different resource entities like services, runtime manager entities like consumers, routes, plugins, etc. Coming to resource allocation, as customers pay for Kong Connect depending on their usage, they want to make sure that their resources are allocated wisely and correctly, and there are no overages, there are no site outages. So we have different features available to enable you to do fine-grained control, resource allocation. And lastly, auditing. To be in compliance with legal and review teams, we provide audit logs. We also provide different authentication schemes to streamline authentication into Connect. So diving right into it, to start off, we have teams and roles. Under organization in Connect, you'll find teams, which is a pretty common topic outside in all SaaS products. To look at a particular team, you'll find that a team is a collection of users with a specific permission set. So a team would be a specific collection of users, and the permissions that they all have would be the same, depending on whether we use a predefined team. If you're having access to Kong Connect in enterprise mode, you'll also have the ability to define custom teams where you can specify custom roles and decide what permissions apply to the users in those teams. So teams basically are a mechanism to do role-based access control, but provide more flexibility and more autonomous control than just defining roles in their entirety. So for authorization, we can use different strategies. We can use Connect's predefined teams that we'll go into when I demo Connect. And each of those predefined teams come with a standard set of roles. They can be fully managed roles, like admin roles, or they can be partially managed roles, which offer viewing privileges as opposed to the entire set of CRUD operations. You can also create custom teams where you can define specific roles and they will get inherited by the users that you assign to your teams. Which brings me to the next topic, which is inviting users. In order to add users to your teams, you can invite your users by providing their email addresses, or you can add already existing users to different teams and even custom teams. Once you have added your users to your teams and provided them roles, you can further customize this at any time, provided you are an org admin. You can decide the memberships by going into the members tab. You can also do assignment and permission control on a entity basis, whether it is a particular service, or you can be even more fine-grained than that and assign permissions to a particular service version. Going into the runtime groups, you can define permissions for specific entities like consumers or routes or plugins, etc. Or you can define them on an entire runtime group, whether it is the default runtime group or you can create your own custom runtime groups. You could also decide to specify permissions spanning the entire instances of the same type, like spanning permissions for entire runtime groups, all of your runtime groups, by providing a wildcard star. Next up are users. In users, you can create your own users and also as an org admin manage users belonging to your organization. You can invite them on an ad hoc basis by providing their email address. If you configure SSO with Konnect, then you can invite them through your SSO vendor and you can completely skip the regular authentication. So for users, you can decide to specify individual roles by assigning them custom roles, by assigning them predefined roles, or by specifying team memberships. You can specify team memberships for the previously discussed predefined teams by allocating users to predefined teams. You can also create custom teams and specify different kind of permissions on an entity of a certain type or all entities of a certain type, whether they be services, whether they be runtime groups or consumers, so on and so forth. You can also specify different teams by assigning emails and being by able to change memberships, team memberships on the fly. So you're not tied into a team membership. Once you invite a user to a team, you can change it, and you can also add on roles that are specialized and customized to a particular user. How does the interplay of teams and users work? As one would expect, it's a many-to-many relationship that's common to other SaaS products. A team typically consists of multiple users, as one would expect. A user can also belong to multiple teams and inherit roles and permissions from the various teams that they are part of. So if a user is part of multiple teams, how would their roles behave? Roles would be additive in the sense if Michael Schumacher is part of Ferrari, for example, and also part of Maserati team, then he will get permissions from both Ferrari and Maserati. So roles are additive in that sense. For example, if Michael were to have permissions of an admin from Ferrari and a developer from Maserati, then which one would take precedence? In this case, the highest permission would be allocated to Michael, and that would be acting in effect. Coming on to the next one, which is system accounts, which is a unique feature to Konnect. System accounts are a subclass of users, but they are not actual users. System accounts are basically service accounts, and their greatest benefit is for automations and integrations. For example, as you're an admin managing accounts and third-party integrations and assigning them to a particular user, you may run into problems when the user departs the organization and you are left trying to access the accounts that were tied to their email. Enter system accounts, which solve that problem for you by being system-wide and particular to your organization. They're not tied to an individual user, so they do not have an associated email or a user's personal info. Since they do not have any user personal info, you can use a system account only in APIs or CLIs. So you won't be able to use a system account in Konnect UI. This is an enterprise-only feature, and this is especially useful for third-party integrations, for even running test flows, and for ensuring that you're isolating your system accounts and ensuring continuous service, providing continuous delivery, and also avoiding the risk of outages, avoiding the risk of bottlenecks should your individual users' situation change as it would change over time. One can also do all the permissions and inheritance from rule-based access control that one can do with users. So you can assign system accounts to existing teams that have predefined roles. You can also create custom teams and assign system accounts to them, and they would in turn would inherit all the roles that are derived from the custom team. You can specify a system account to have permissions specific to a service or across multiple services or across even all entities that are of type service. Similarly, with runtime groups, you can specify a system account to have permissions for a particular runtime group entity or across all runtime groups or across all runtime group entities of a specific type like plugins or like upstreams, for example. Coming to that interesting feature, which is Audit Logs setup. We are currently in beta and expect to go GA this month. So what are Audit Logs? Audit Logs are set of streaming events that provide information about actions happening in your organization. This is also an enterprise-only feature and provides organization administrators the ability to monitor and be vigilant of their overall system. If actively and proactively monitoring these audit logs can help you avoid system outages by being able to detect any suspicious behavior, any outliers, and be able to proactively monitor and respond to incidents before they occur. Actively monitoring audit logs also helps you respond faster to incidents when they occur and avoid system outages. And audit logs also provide governance and compliance with legal and review teams, enabling you to be providing logs and providing detailed information and stack traces whenever you are looking to drill down into a particular event that happened on a particular day at a particular time. You're able to derive great information and get a great picture and a snapshot in time of how your system responded to that event and to those set of actions. So audit logs also help you to understand what are your most popular areas in your service and what are the heat maps, how can you can use these audit logs to provide them to Kong support or your own organization support for further help with incidents, for further help with debugging and investigations. So in audit logs, currently we provide the way to set up an audit log via webhook. You can configure your CM provider for security incidents and event management, and that configuration of your CM provider is specific to the vendor that you use. Typically, companies tend to use Splunk or Datadog, and you can configure your CM provider and then set up a webhook in Konnect to push all the events in Konnect to your CM provider. So audit logs are region specific, depending on the entitlements that your organization has, whether they are allocated multiple geos like US, EU. In the future, we plan to support more geos like Australia and Japan. So depending on your region entitlements, you can configure audit logs per region. Once you configure your CM provider and have it ready to receive audit logs from Konnect, then you can set up a webhook in Konnect and use those configuration details from your CM provider, plug them into Konnect, and then get set up with sending webhooks. You can also send replay jobs. Replay jobs provide you the ability to view a snapshot in time in the past of audit log events that you may have missed due to a misconfiguration or errors or some services going down. You can view replay jobs within a restricted time range of the last 7 days, and you can view different statuses. You can get a complete picture of how your webhook is setting up and sending replay logs and audit logs, depending on the statuses and responses that you receive. And you can get a great control into sending replay jobs depending on the time frame that you want. You can set up custom time frames, or you can specify the predefined time ranges within the last 7 days. Coming next to auth settings. Auth settings, as you would know, we provide in Konnect not just basic default native authentication, but also the ability to configure IDP providers. We support OpenID Connect and the typical provider Okta. So you can integrate Okta with Konnect and enable SSO for your organization. And once you enable SSO for your organization, you cannot have a mixture of authentication schemes. So one thing to note is once you enable SSO for your users, all of them will have to log in via your IDP provider. As long as you are the administrator, you get the choice to log in using Konnect's default base authentication versus using IDP provided authentication. IDP provided authentication can also be taken further to configure permissions. Yes, we are back at it. So you can use, for example, you can use Okta's groups to define claims and define team mappings within Konnect. So Konnect will be able to pull Okta's group claims directly once you define them in Okta and connect Okta and Konnect together. So you would not need to define teams and permissions specifically in Konnect if you have defined them prior in Okta. If you have defined them using some third-party tool like Azure, then you would need to ask your vendor to upload them in that vendor, like Okta, for example, upload them in a CSV format so that they can be consumed by Konnect. But basically, you can outsource your identity provider and authentication settings to your IDP provider as long as it is OpenID Connect provider, and have Konnect consume that and read that from that provider. So we went over the default authentication, which uses username and password, which is enabled by default for all users in all organizations. You need to specifically enable and configure your OpenID authentication if you wish to connect an IDP provider to Konnect. You can then specify claims and scopes and define them via groups in Okta and then have Konnect consume them. So we are now done with organization as an administrative user. And coming back to regular users, there's something there for you that you can control. As thank you for being along for the ride for this part of the way. Now you can further specify and customize your own user information and decide to take control of the settings that you control, like changing password, deleting your account, and also requesting the right to be forgotten under GDPR. Since we support Konnect in multiple geos, we also have to be GDPR compliant with different geos like EU, and we provide the ability for a user to specify that they want to revoke all their information from Konnect and Kong as well, including all marketing information, all personal information via a process for RTBF. We also provide a way called personal access tokens, which are an automated tokens. So that's one of two parts of Konnect's token-based authentication as an alternative to traditional usernames and passwords. And you can automate that for use in third-party integrations, automations, test workflows, and also for making sure for additional security and removing the need for remembering passwords and storing them. In my account, you can self-serve. Before having this feature, our customers had to go through support and customer representatives for requesting a manual change to their personal information, like their profile name and their email. They also had no way of changing their password once a user was invited and had set up their initial password. We changed that now to a self-serve dedicated space for users. Just like other SaaS providers, you can now self-serve, and you can also customize all your personal information in one place. You can also delete your account as long as you are not the org admin and the only user in your organization. If you have other users in your organization, then you would need to submit a request to delete yourself and reassign the org admin for your organization to some other existing users. We already spoke about right to be forgotten as part of GDPR. Coming next to personal access tokens, which are an interesting token-based mechanism where we can completely automate the tokens, generate them. Something unique about personal access tokens are for security purposes, once we generate them with a specific expiration time. You can customize that in increments from 7 days to 30 days to 1 month, 6 months to up to a year. So the maximum expiration time for a personal access token is 1 year. You can at most specify and create 10 personal access tokens. Also, once a PAT is created, then you need to store it in a safe place. We do not surface PATs in the Konnect UI for security reasons. If you'd like to read more about all the things that we went over, we have the identity management V2 API spec, where you can use the identity management API to do all the actions we are about to see in our Konnect UI demo. You can choose to create teams, invite users, create roles, create custom teams, then create system accounts, add those system accounts to your teams and custom teams, create audit logs, send webhooks and configure webhooks per region, send replay jobs per webhook per region, be able to configure your IDP provider with Konnect, all of these things with the Identity Management API. You can also configure your own profile information, whether it is changing your username or email, setting up your preferred name for marketing purposes, or configuring your password, changing your account, or setting up personal access tokens. You can do all of this via the API. We also have detailed documentation over here for you to traverse through for troubleshooting, for gaining additional context into the why of things and how you can configure each entity. You can also follow along the release notes where you can find up-to-date information about latest Kong releases and what's new in Konnect. So without further ado, jumping right into the demo. In production, if you land on the overview page, you'll notice to the left, there's a sidebar called organization. You do have to be at least an org admin to be able to view and manage entities within organization. If you're not an org admin, you can still view teams and users and see how you as a user have roles and how they are inherited from different teams and different roles. System accounts is an enterprise-only feature. Audit logs is also an enterprise-only feature and currently in beta. We will be going GA this month, so this will be available at the end of the month. And auth settings are also an enterprise feature. So for controlling system accounts, audit logs, and auth settings, you do need to be at least an org admin. Diving deeper into teams, you'll notice that we have a set of predefined teams. They fall into two different categories. One set of predefined teams are fully managed. For example, org admin. We already spoke about org admin and being an org admin as a prereq for being able to access all entities under organization. You can also be a service admin and be able to administer settings specific to a particular service, including service versions, including application registration in Dev Portal, including documentation and publishing the documentation to Dev Portal. You could be an analytics admin and get control over analytics and reports and summaries. Then we have some read-only rules like org admin read-only, where you are just a viewer and can only view organization level settings, but not do any um, edit or modify operations on org level settings. You can also be a read-only viewer where you will just have viewing privileges, but not the ability to edit or modify analytics summaries or reports. You could be a service developer where we give you a subset of permissions than a service admin, where we allow you to create and manage versions, but we do not give you the privileges of publishing applications to your dev portal. It could be a runtime admin, and where we provide you the admin privileges and restrict them to runtime groups under runtimes. This can be further drilled down where we can define specific predefined roles and further restrict the permissions to specific entities in a runtime group like consumers, routes. We'll go into that shortly. Coming back to portal admin, the last predefined role, we provide specific admin privileges and restrict them to the dev portal, where you can publish service packages and do application registrations and deregistrations. So these are all the set of predefined teams. And a team is a collection of users which inherit those specific roles that come with a particular team. You can also specify a custom team. Now, you have to be an admin in an enterprise organization to define a custom team. For example, if you define Ferrari and say, give it a description, getting fun with the race car themes. So upon creating a custom team, you'll find you have the ability to invite users. You can add users. For now, I just have myself for the purposes of this demo. So I'm going to add myself over here. If you want, you can, if you change your mind, you can go and remove a user. You can also invite more users and add them as members to your team. If you decide to have more granular permission control, and you can then specify roles specific to your service. For example, you can specify roles that is particular to a region. Currently, you'll notice for this organization, I have two region entitlements, US and EU. If you decide to specify an existing service, you can then specify roles that apply only to this particular service instance. For example, deployer, and you can save this. If you decide you want a role that spans across all entities of service type, then you can specify a wildcard and say all instances and create roles that are specific to all instances of type service. For example, that. Coming to runtime groups, we can further apply fine-grained permissions and access control depending on the region that you want to specify. For example, EU, you can create a runtime group instance. You can specify a specific runtime group or choose to use the wildcard and have your roles apply across all instances of runtime manager. You can decide the roles that you want. You'll notice that these roles are a little bit different for services versus runtime groups. They are specific to runtime group entities and sub-entities like certificates. You can choose to be an admin for a certificate, you can define an admin for a cloud gateway or for a consumer. You can also have more reduced permissions by decreasing the scope of privileges allowed to just being a creator, where you can create a runtime group and then get owner, like runtime owner privileges, but only for that specific runtime group. So you'll notice that this role does not grant access to the existing runtime groups. You can also choose to have even more drill down permission levels by specifying them for sub-entities like keys or plugins, routes, SNIs. All of these are subtypes of runtime groups, and we will go over them. Now you can choose to add users over here. You can choose to edit them, remove a role, save it. If you want, you can also remove this role defined for a particular runtime group, which is the default runtime group completely. It's an irreversible action. Once you click remove, it goes away. So that was all about teams. Something more that you can do with teams is completely delete your custom team or edit it. You can change the description, you can change the name, save it. You'll notice the name being updated. You can also choose to delete your team, and we require you to confirm your action to make sure that's something you actually want to do, and delete your custom team. You can again create a custom team and go through the similar workflow, specify permissions across individual users by inviting them, assign individual users by roles by assigning them to particular services, or across all services, can assign roles to a particular runtime group or across all of runtime groups in the runtime manager. Now coming to users, you'll notice that you can see users that are already created. If you're an org owner, you see a specific badge indicating that you're the org owner. You can invite users by specifying their email address. For example, you can specify an email address and create aliases for it, like hq.com. You can also specify different teams at a time of creating and inviting a user by giving them wing privileges, for example. by giving them read-only privileges for org admin and invite a user. They will receive an invitation email and with a link to actually accept that invitation. One thing to note is once you send an invite to your users, that link expires in 72 hours. So you need your users to accept their invite and create and register an account Konnect. You'll notice as long as you're an org admin and have invited users, while they haven't accepted their invite, there's a pending badge to indicate that you have sent an invite and it is still pending acceptance. Upon clicking a user, then you can define and change their permissions. These are the roles that you already added via team memberships during inviting a user. You can specify and change this if you change your mind. If the situation changes, you can remove those roles. You can assign them roles that are specific to a region and a service in the region. Similar to how we did it for Teams, you can do it on a per user basis, you can define all services and assign roles over here. If you choose to apply your roles to a particular region's all services, then you can specify this wildcard and you can add other different roles or a combination of roles. And we have provide informational text over here to indicate what do those roles actually mean within the context of Konnect. Coming to runtime groups, something similar to services, you can specify, you can change the region, specify roles for this user for runtime groups, whether it is a specific runtime group being the default one, specify roles which are specific to runtime sub-entities like consumer, like gateway server, root admin, save them. You can also choose to apply your roles across all of runtime groups that you may create in the future and specify all instances and say admin role, plugin admin, vault admin. So these are all the sub-entities that we provide in a runtime group under runtime manager. Now that's saved. You can, if the situation changes, you can remove these roles, you can remove these assigned permissions by removing those assigned teams from runtime groups. You can edit users and the roles that they're assigned by editing it over here. So that was all about users. Now, these were human users who had an associated email and associated personal information. If we look at system accounts, we'll find that we can create service accounts that help us with integrations, automations, test workflows, so on and so forth. And these are like service accounts. So they do not have any personal information. You can use these system accounts when using the CLI or APIs, but you won't be able to use the system accounts when using the Konnect UI because there's no associated email to log in. So you can create a system account, for example, you can create the fastest race car in the fictional world to indicate that it is an bot account, a fictional account. It's not, it doesn't represent a real user. And you can specify the system account to have different tags or labels under description. So you can say bot and call it cars bot. You can be as creative and as descriptive as you want to be to provide more information to other org admins or other users in your organization. Similarly to users, you can define team memberships by using a pre-selected team and inheriting roles for the system account from those teams. You can create services and create permissions for those services by using services from here, by specifying the region over here and adding roles for a particular service. You can also choose to apply roles to all of the instances that are of service type by specifying the wildcard, by choosing the region, by choosing other roles. All of these roles are additive in nature. So as I mentioned earlier, they'll all get applied. And for Lightning McQueen, you can have roles that come via team memberships. You can have roles that come via services, and you can have roles that come via runtime manager. So when you look at Lightning McQueen, you'll find that permissions are a subset of team membership, services, and runtime groups. Similarly, if you had a real user, like myself, for example, you'll find that the permissions are a subset of team memberships, they come from services, and they come from runtime groups. And the sum total of these three give the full picture of permissions for a particular user, whether they are a human user or a bot user. You can find that you can further create tokens. By example, if you click on a particular user, you can create personal access tokens, which we'll discuss later, but you can create managed tokens and generate a token and use this token for logging in. As I mentioned, when you're using a system account, you can only use a system account with a CLI or Konnect APIs. So for that, you'll need a authentication scheme, and that is where using a PAT or a personal access token comes in handy with a system account, since we don't have the traditional authentication scheme of a username password. So you can create a token like, let's say, Mater, Lightning McQueen's best friend, specify the expiration time, and generate a token. Once you generate a token, you'll notice that the access token is surfaced only at the time of token creation. You want to copy it, store it in a safe place, in your notes maybe, and once you click it, we do not surface the token again. If we create a token like another one of Lightning's friends and create it within the span of 7 days expiration, you'll notice that once your success toasts are there, once you have created a token, we display a warning icon to let you know that this token is going to expire in 7 days, in 6 days since we created it today, and you won't be able to use it past those 7 days. You'll have to generate a new token. So that was about generating tokens for system accounts. Going back to system accounts, you can create more such system accounts for your particular organization. You can filter them by name. We provide this filtering functionality also for teams, also for users. You can filter by the exact name. You can filter by the description. Coming back to audit logs, this is the feature in beta that's going to be released in later this month, and it's an enterprise only feature. So for audit logs, you'll find that you can configure your CM provider, and that is vendor specific configuration depending on what third party security, incident, and event management provider you choose to use, whether it is a mainstream provider like Splunk or the latest newcomer Datadog. Once you configure it, you need to copy the configuration from it and specify that in the setup. So I already had a pre-configured webhook where I specified a URL for the endpoint. You can hover over the info tooltips and figure out what information you need to provide to configure and set up a webhook. You can specify an auth header. For security reasons, we do not surface the auth header, just like we do not surface the tokens that we created earlier. You can choose to override this by specifying a new token, save it. You can specify two different log formats. We support CEF ArcSight format as the default. We also support the ever popular JSON format. You need to actually enable your webhook. So you'll notice that I already had it enabled. You can disable it and save it if you decide to put your webhook temporarily on hold, if you want to pause receiving audit logs in your CM provider. But in order to actually receive logs, you need to enable it, save it, to look at the success toast and find that you're actually sending audit logs. You'll notice that there's a status badge that we display over here to indicate if your webhook is ready to go and receive webhooks and send audit logs to your pre-configured CM provider. For some reason, if you notice that you're missing audit logs within a certain time period, whether it is due to a misconfigured webhook or errors in your CM provider or any service outage between your service provider and CM provider, you can go to the replay section. You can choose the custom time frame within the last 7 days. You can choose it in increments of predefined time ranges like 15 minutes, 1 hour, 6 hours. Click apply and hit send replay. You'll notice that we have started sending a replay. There was success toast, and we display the status of the replay job over here. You can click on refresh to view the status in real time and get status updates. Once the status goes from an in pending status, whether it is accepted, pending, or running, to a completed or a failed status, that is a terminal status. We can't request a refresh anymore. You can again send a replay job. However, once a replay job is in a terminal state, you can specify a custom time frame within the last 7 days, for example, like that. You can specify a date range and a time range, hit apply and send replay. You'll notice that once we send a replay, once it is in progress, we disable sending replays to avoid sending multiple replays at the same time. We can only have one replay per region, and we display the status response over here with the start time, end time, and updated at. You can hit refresh to get status updates. Once it gets into a terminal state, we can send a replay again. This is on a per region basis. So you'll notice that our organization has multiple geos configured, US and EU. So you can configure a webhook over here by sending, let's say, HTTPS and sending myfriend.com, sending a token over here. You'll notice that I have set up a fake website which is not configured to receive webhooks. If I enable it and save, after some time, we'll notice that the status changes to inactive as we try to send a replay job. For example, if we try to hit replay and it gives a success note that replay was sent, after some time, the status will change to inactive because we were not actually able to send replay jobs on the back end. Coming on to the auth settings, you can now specify different authentication schemes. By default, the built-in authentication scheme, which is the default native Konnect authentication, is enabled. As an org admin in enterprise, you can specify different OIDC providers. We support Okta out of the box. You first need to configure your authentication provider, whether it is Okta or some other third-party identity provider. You need to configure it, get the configuration settings, and use them to configure your IDP provider in Konnect. You can also specify custom claims, groups, scopes, and have them carried over in Konnect by connecting your IDP provider with Konnect. I'm going to log out and log in as a different user who already has pre-configured IDP provider with Okta. So I'm going to log in as this user and walk you through how the configuration looks in auth settings. So if you go to organization and go all the way to auth settings, you'll notice that we have OIDC already as enabled. So one thing to note is while we can have multiple authentication schemes enabled at the same time, like basic auth and OIDC auth, your users will only be able to log in through SSO once you have enabled OIDC. For org admins, however, you can choose to log in via the basic default authentication or via SSO. As an org admin, you can also configure your OIDC. Should your settings change, you can specify the issuer URI, the client ID, the client secret. For security reasons, we don't surface the secret in the UI either, but you can override it, you can edit it, and the login path. By clicking on advanced fields, here you get to control the team mappings. So once you have configured SSO through an identity provider, you don't necessarily need to provide permissions and role-based access control through teams and users in Konnect. You can outsource that to your third-party IDP provider and use different scopes. These scopes will be, once they are defined in your IDP provider, they will be inherited by Konnect. You can also provide different claim mappings like name, email, and groups. You can choose to deselect scopes, save that. You can choose to disable OIDC provider. We require you to confirm that you actually wish to disable it. And you'll notice that it is disabled. Once you disable OIDC, your users will be again forced to log in through basic auth. As an org admin, you can choose to enable it once again by choosing different scopes, by choosing different client secrets, and hitting save and having it enabled again. You can also go to team mappings and decide if you want your team mappings to be derived via Konnect's teams and users and different roles, Or do you also want it to be a mixture coming from your identity provider? So you can click this and you can choose to inherit the teams coming from Konnect and Okta, for example. So for example, if you have existing custom groups in Okta, like let's say analytics, that you can map those groups to the corresponding teams in Konnect. You can hover over here to find out what actual permissions apply to a particular team in Konnect and how that can map to your identity provider and the teams over there. And save things. If you decide to change your mind, you can clear it out and discard changes. Hit save. So these are all the things, the cool controls that you can take charge of as an org admin in the driver's seat. If you decide to take control of your user, you can go to the user initials icon. So switching gears a little bit, we first spoke about all the organization level settings. You'll notice on the top right, there is a user initials icon. Clicking on it, you will find that there are user level controls like your username, the org that you belong to, my account, personal access tokens, and of course, logout, which will log you out as expected. Digging deeper into my account, this is your dedicated one-stop page for controlling and self-serving your profile. In the first iteration, we are providing the user initials icon, which is derived from your preferred name if you have set it. Preferred name is an optional field that you can choose to customize your profile, customize the welcome messaging, and all the communication that Konnect uses to communicate with you. For example, I could set it to anything I want and have that saved. It reflects in the welcome messaging over here. It reflects in the user initial icons that is derived from the preferred name. You can also choose to leave it empty and have your full name be the default name that is used in communication. For example, over here, that is used for the user initials icon. Organization and email are actually settings that are controlled by your org admin. So as a regular user, you can only specify your full name and your preferred name at this time. You can choose, however, to change your password and self-serve. You don't need to go through customer reps anymore. We provide handy, helpful hints about the password requirements that we expect. So when setting a new password, we disable the update button as long as the new password confirmation is empty. We do validation checks to make sure that the new password and confirm password match, the lengths match. We also provide visual indicators to give you hints about what requirements have been met. If certain requirements are not met, we give you again hints around which requirements need to be fulfilled before you can go and update your password. Finally, you can choose to delete your account. So if you're an org admin, you can delete your account as long as you're the sole user in your organization. If you're a regular user, you can definitely go ahead, click delete account. Deleting account is an irreversible reaction, just like all other actions for deletes, whether deleting teams, whether deleting users, deleting system accounts. We require you to confirm your action and type in your email over here. If you do go ahead with deleting your account, you will be logged out. Your account will be deleted on the back end and you will be redirected to the login page. So I'm going to hit cancel for now because I want to show more things to you. Over here, you can opt in to remove all your personal marketing information from the entirety of Kong by clicking on privacy site. Will be redirected to Kong's privacy site. If you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll find a form. Currently, this is a manual process where you fill in your user information. You can choose to delete a request and make sure that all your information is deleted from Kong and submit this request. At this time, this request for removing all your personal information and the right to be forgotten goes through a manual process. It goes for review with legal and compliance. Once it is reviewed, it is actually a long process, and then we notify you via email about your process being complete, your request being processed. We plan to make this online in the future. Going back to my account, that was all about my account. Finally, I'm going to talk about personal access tokens. I already gave you an overview when discussing system accounts. I'm going to show you quickly how you can generate a path over here, specify the expiration time, for example, 90 days, generate it. Just similar to system accounts, we show you the access token only once at the time of creation. You can copy it, store it securely, and we won't display it again for security purposes. Hit copied. You can have a maximum of 10 tokens over here, and you can use them in the CLI and the API. That's it. I'm going to wrap it and open the floor for questions. I see Dahlia is waiting in the wings. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. Thank you, Manjiri. We have a few questions. Let's start with the Q&A. We have some questions from Daniel.
Sure. The first question is, there's a mention earlier of not being in Japan, Australia. Oh, so is that for the product as a whole or a particular service? So it is for the product as a whole. Basically, a geo region, whether it is US or EU, those are the regions that we currently support. You can specify a region and you can define your services, the permissions for a particular service or permissions for all services spanning all entities of type service or all entities of a particular runtime group subentity, whether like there's consumers or routes or plugins, and have them be restricted by geo. So all these entities are geo-specific. For example, audit logs are geo-specific. Every webhook that you configure is geo-specific. So to reiterate, you can specify a geo for every entity, and the geo regions that you're entitled to come in from via your user, via the entitlements for your organization. But you can decide and choose a region per entity, like per service, per runtime group. So that is per entity, and it doesn't apply to your entire org. You get to decide which region applies to what particular entity. Hopefully that answers your question. So moving on to the second question, I wanted to confirm what I thought I heard. Based on the groups you're in, you're defaulted to most privilege and not least privilege. Is that correct? Yes, that's right. So for example, if you, Daniel, if you have a permission that is coming in as a part of team membership of, let's say, Ferrari, if you're getting the service admin role, and let's say you also have the privilege of, let's say, a service creator via Maserati team. So you have two different privileges. The higher privilege is that of a service admin within the context of Konnect. So you will be defaulted to the most privilege, and that will be honored for all the services. So yes, roles are additive and the highest privileges wins. So service system accounts are only available in enterprise. That's right. Yes, that's an enterprise only feature. And the last question, is there a roadmap for other geos? Yes, definitely. We have this issue with GDPR requirements and we are in the regions we need to be. Definitely. So currently we support US and EU. If you currently do not have entitlement for EU, that's a question for your customer representative and they can get you all set up with EU for your organization. Yes, we do plan to support other regions. In 2023, in late 2023, we plan to support Australia first and then later on Japan. So yes, those geos will be upcoming shortly. Hopefully that answers your question. Happy to take more questions.
Awesome. A few more minutes, maybe check out the chat. Let's see if we have something there.
Sure.
I think it should be all okay, but.
Okay, so I see session related to plugins. I think that's a question for Dahlia. Maybe she might know if we have scheduled sessions for Konnect. I think we might have sessions for Konnect APIs for configuring runtime manager entities like plugins.
Yeah, exactly. So I was actually just posting, if you guys want to join our July user call, you can find it here. And then I will give you a link to all of our events. They're upcoming and you can see which one you like to join there, right here.
Oh, I wanted to tackle this question from Randy, which is for additive roles. If you're admin on one team, does that give you admin access across the platforms? I don't think so. If I understand your question correctly, the whole purpose of defining teams and defining roles like custom roles and custom teams is that you restrict your access to a particular team. So when you say across the platform, I assume you mean that is the access unlimited across all entities in Konnect? No, the access will be restricted to the entity that you have defined. For example, if you define the access for a particular service, then the access is restricted to that service. If you define it across all services by using the wildcard, all instances, that will be for all services. You can define it for a particular runtime group. You can define it for a sub-entity under a runtime group like consumers. You can define it for a particular consumer. You can define it across all plugins. Basically, you can restrict it to be as fine-grained and granular as you want. And the only way of getting access across the entire platform is by being an org admin, which I was demonstrating. If you're an org admin for your organization, then you will have access across the entirety of Konnect. Those were all hello messages. I think that was the last question. Happy to take more questions. So Randy asking a follow-up question. So the additive access only applies across the service the system owns. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it depends on what you have defined. If you define teams for a particular service, let me demonstrate real quick. I think we have about a minute, so I can dive into it hopefully. So if you define a custom team and you define privileges over here, for example, if you decide to go to a user and define access over here using the privileges, using the predefined roles, then the predefined roles dictate the access that you have available for a particular entity or across entities. You can make this further granular and restricted by going to services and define an access for a particular service, like this service, for example, and defining a role. So the combination of this role and the combination of this particular service in the region of US defines access for all in this particular service and restricted to this region. Hopefully that makes it more clear. So to answer your question, Randy, it depends on all the restrictions that you put, whether across it is the region, across the actual entity, and with the using the roles. So it's a combination of roles and entities and regions.
Awesome. All right, just before the hour, we managed. Thank you everyone for staying. Thank you for asking questions. Thanks, Randy, for the great question. We hope to see you at our next user call in July. Thank you so much, Manjiri, for the great presentation. It was a pleasure having you here. And we'll see you all at the next event. Have a great evening, great day. See you soon. Bye-bye.